This is a mini video lecture on the Art of Documentation MLA. Both the English and Humanities field use MLA for all writing. This course, English 112, will use MLA formatting and documentation for all assignments. It is important for students to know that the goal is not to remember exactly how to cite different sources, but more so how to use the resources available to you to make sure that your MLA is accurate. MLA stands for Modern Language Association. When it comes to MLA, we usually are discussing two different things: documentation and formatting. Documentation refers to documenting the actual sources one has used in their writing, while formatting refers to the actual format of the paper. This includes, but is not limited to, the heading, the header, the font size, and the paper being double-spaced, along with the margins. This mini video lecture will focus solely on the documentation aspect of MLA. What is a works cited page and how is it related to MLA documentation? Many of you have probably already composed a works cited page for one of your previous English classes or another humanities class. The works cited page is a list of every source quoted or paraphrased within the text of the original document. Each retrievable source cited in the essay must appear on the works cited page and vice versa. This means that if you place a source on your works cited page, the source must be included in your writing. So why do we cite? There are many reasons why it is important to cite. The main three reasons are: documented sources provides credit and recognizes the author and keeps you plagiarism free. It also allows the reader to refer directly to your works cited page. This is valuable for researchers who may want to locate your sources. For an example, if I read a paper on gay adoption in small urban cities and was interested in researching on the same topic, I can look at the writer's works cited page and find other sources that can assist me in my own research. There are rules to follow when citing. MLA requires the entire paper to be double-spaced. This includes the works cited page as well. All entries should be alphabetized by the author's last name. If the work has no author, alphabetize it by its title. The second line of each citation should have an hanging indent and double-spaced. Please note that students often make the mistake and indent the first line. After the first line, each line should have an hanging indent. Here is an example. Note that there is double spacing between all lines, not just between different sources, but all lines. Also, note that this is the first line of this particular source, and once we got to the second line, we indented. And to simply do this, you just press tab 2 times. Note that this source is 3 lines, so every line after the first line has a hanging indent. Do not indent the first line. Here are some basic rules when citing. Titles of books and periodicals are italicized. Titles of articles are put in quotation marks. MLA has changed recently and used to underline titles of books. There is no underlining in MLA anymore. So if you were to see a question on a test that asks about underlining in any situation or under any circumstances in MLA, the question would be incorrect. It is important for students to capitalize all major words in the first and last words of all titles and subtitles. Do not capitalize articles such as a, and the, nor prepositions or coordinating conjunctions. The author's name should always be listed by last name, first name. Another new rule to MLA is to provide the type of material your source is. For example, print or web. When a source is referred to as print, it simply means that it is a hard copy of this source. And when a source is referred to as web, it implies that you received the source from the internet. The type of material is also referred to as type of medium. All sources used in research are required to be documented. These sources can range from a photograph, a personal interview, a cartoon, a film, a CD, a speech, lyrics from a song, or even a visual performance. For an extensive list of sources, students should refer to an MLA Writer's Handbook. On our Moodle page under MLA Resources, there is a handout titled MLA Citation Handout. This handout provides a template for how to cite the basic sources. These templates are included in this mini video lecture. I'm going to go over the basic information that is important to know for each source. When citing a book, it is important to know when citing one author, you simply write the author's last name, first name, and then follow the rest of the template. The title of the book is italicized. You include the city of publication, the publisher, the year, and the type of material. If you were to use a book by two or more authors, it is important to know that only the first author is listed by last name, first name. This means that the second author is listed by their first name, last name as such. King Samuel P. and Randall W. Roth. If you were to use a book by the same author, opposed to writing the author's name twice, you would simply use the three dashes, how it is used here. The decision as far as which source to place first is based on the year that the source was published. To document a magazine article, you will include the author's last name, first name, the title of the article in quotations, the title of the magazine in italics, the date the article was published, the page or page numbers, and the type of material. The type of material will determine if you had a hard copy of the magazine or if you retrieved the article from an online website. Note the date format when including the day. It is important to include the day, the month, and the year. As such, the 15th of January 2004. In academia, it is most popular for both students and instructors to locate articles from scholarly journals. Scholarly journals are journals that are composed of articles that are written by experts in a particular field. In this course, students will learn how to locate and use scholarly articles in their writing. The difference between a journal and a magazine is that journals have volume and issue numbers. It is important to include this when documenting the journal used. For an example, we have included the author's last name, first name, Baskin Yvonne, the title of her article in quotations, the title of the specific journal in italics, the same way we will include the title of the magazine or a title of a book in italics. After the title of the journal is included, the volume number and the issue number is placed directly after that. The year the journal was published is included in parentheses, the pages that were used, and then the type of material. In the event you access the article from an online database, it is important you include the name of the online database. The database name should be italicized and placed directly after the page number. After you include the type of material, which is web, you are required to include the date the source was accessed. See the example below. Online sources should be documented by following the template shown on the screen. Most online sources may have no author. If the online source has no author, you will simply list the source by the title of the web page. MLA requires that the version or edition, publisher, or sponsor is provided for online sources. This information can be located in the About Me section of the web page or at the bottom of the web page. If you are unable to access the publisher, you will simply put NP for no publisher or ND for no date. It is also important to include the date of access. This is important because web pages are often updated or moved. A new change in MLA makes it optional for students to include a URL. The new MLA guidelines assume that users can locate most online sources by entering the author, title, or identifying other information in a search engine or database. In this course, it is optional to use a URL. Please make sure if you do include the URL that the link works. To accurately include the URL, simply write the URL in angle brackets at the end of the entry. Here is an example of two sources documented with the URL and without a URL. The first one is an example without a URL. Marine Team Sounds Alarm for Reefs is the title of the web page. Sometimes an actual article may be on a web page that you are using. Other times it may be a website that just simply has information that you want. So you would include the title of the actual web page. An example of this is below. The website Alcohol Alert provided information on Hawaii drunk driving statistics. There was no specific author for the information given, so the title of the web page was included in quotation marks. Note that the name of the publisher was available and is included in the documentation. This source here has the URL placed accurately. The URL is placed in angle brackets after the date access. However, the source is written incorrectly. See if you could take a look at the source and figure out what is wrong. If you guessed that the source was not double spaced or had a hanging indent, you were correct. The way to document the source within your essay is referred to as in-text citation. In-text citation is also known as parenthetical documentation. It is a way to cite external sources at the point in the document at which they are used. They are used in conjunction with and not as a replacement for the works cited page. When conducting research, it is important that your paper includes in-text citations. Oftentimes, students include 1 to 3 in-text citations and consider their paper to be a research paper. When writing a research paper, you have to show that you did research. So how often should one give citations? If you are using a source and you have several facts in a row within one paragraph coming from that same source, you may use one citation to cover them all. You will place the citation after that last fact. However, the citation must be in the same paragraph as all the facts. When using sources for any paper, it is important for students to realize that the sources should support their argument, not overpower their writing. With that being said, the writing should be at least 75 to 80% of the student's own thought and only 20 to 25% of sources. To include parenthetical citations in MLA format, you simply include the author and the page number in parentheses. Notice there is no P and there is also no comma. Here is an example. The struggle for identity is common during puberty. Keeling 125. Many of you may be wondering, how come this was cited, however, the phrase is not in quotation? This is because this means that this was paraphrased from the source. It is also important to cite even if you paraphrase information from a source. When quoting directly from a source or paraphrasing, if you do not introduce the author's name in this sentence, you are required to include the last name in parentheses along with the page number. For example, more people today look to blame others for their problems instead of taking their own responsibility. Smith, 86. However, in the next example, the student introduced the author and was only required to include the page number. It is not necessary to include the author's name in parentheses after you have introduced the author because this will result only in students being repetitive. If there are 2 to 3 authors, include all of their names in the order they appear within the source. When including more than one author, only include their last name. Be sure that you include the parenthetical citation inside the period, not outside the period. Oftentimes, articles, editorials, pamphlets, websites, and other materials have no author listed. In this instance, give the first distinctive word of the title followed by the page number. For example, her distinctive writing style adds to her mystique. Quotation, Plath, page 19. If you have an article or web page that does not have an author, you do not have to include the title article or the entire web page's title. You can include the first few important words. Parenthetical citations and secondhand quotations. When you quote someone who has been quoted in one of your sources, use the abbreviation QTD.N, which stands for quoted in. The quote used at the bottom was quoted in the text that the student referred to. In this instance, she cannot give credit to Keelan, but has to let her audience know that this was quoted in Keelan. Here are some special cases for parenthetical citations. For electronic sources, whether it's an article or a book, you may not have a page number. If you do not have a page number, you are simply required to include the author's last name in the parentheses. If the source is an interview, lecture, or speech, include the person's name in your introductory clause with no parentheses. Example: Julia Cohen, graduate student in English and self-professed goth, states that being goth is more of a state of mind than an outlandish dress. When it comes to MLA, be sure to use all resources available to you on Moodle or by using the current edition of a writer's handbook.